We are glad you're here. My name is Stephanie Boret. I'm the Director of Donor Relations for the Coastal Land Trust. In case there's any first timers, I want to let you know we are recording and we're live on Facebook. There will be some links in the chat that you can click on and it'll open up a page. You can go after the lecture to check some resources out, maybe pop a donation our way. If you haven't done that in a little while, we would sure appreciate it. And finally, we'll keep everyone on mute during the talk, but afterward you can unmute and ask questions, or you can type them in the chat and I'll read them out loud, and we'll get all of your questions answered. So we are very happy to welcome Ladd Bayliss today. Ladd is an Outer Banks local, and she is currently serving as the Executive Director of the Outer Banks Conservationists since 2019. During Ladd's time at the OBC, she has overseen development of several new programs and initiatives, including the ongoing From the Mountains to the Sea Oral History Project. Today, we will learn more about the Outer Banks Conservationists, their efforts, preservation efforts, innovative educational programs, and ongoing historic research. Thanks, Ladd, for being here, and it's all you.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared. Okay. So, can everyone see my slides?
I can see them. They look good.
Okay, great. So thank you to everyone for joining, and of course, thanks to Coastal Land Trust for putting on this super awesome series that I've enjoyed so much. Again, my name is Ladd Bayliss. I'm the Executive Director of Outer Banks Conservationists. We're based here in Manio. Outer Banks Conservationists, we're a nonprofit organization we formed back in 1980. So we work to protect natural, historic, and cultural resources by conservation and preservation of a sense of place. And through our education efforts, that solidifies these values for our future generations. Making sure we pass these values along is a big part of our work. And the Outer Banks region has been the backbone of our organization, evidenced in the name since we formed. So today, we own and operate two historic sites, the Currituck Beach Lighthouse in historic Corolla Village and Island Farm on Roanoke Island. Both are focused on 19th century Outer Banks life from two pretty different perspectives. So by preserving these critical sites on the Outer Banks, both their buildings and their natural components, we have a really captivating kind of hands-on platform that we can get folks to engage with history and the Outer Banks, and therefore those people are more apt to protect it themselves as time goes on. So as an organization, we do several things. We make, first and foremost, history available and accessible to the public at both of our historic sites. Kind of hands-on experiences, experiential learning, that's what we're all about. It's the foundation of our educational work. By having this sort of hands-on approach, we're bringing history alive and making it approachable by anyone. We like to make it exciting, whether it's a lighthouse climb or, various farm activities, just as a few examples. Another thing we do is we hold land in conservation through ownership, both at our sites and adjacent land to our sites that serve as buffer areas to kind of preserve the historical context of the site. We conduct our own historic research each year with our team of in-house historians to make our programming more robust, diverse, and better over time. We write and contribute to articles, we publish some of our own research, and we help others who are researching the Outer Banks or history at one of our sites. We also host workshops and special events at either site and elsewhere. Mostly, we're here to convey a deep, as I said before, sense of place to all of those that wish to experience it at our historic sites. So to understand our organization fully, it's easiest to understand our sites themselves. The Currituck Beach Light Station is where we first began as an organization. The lighthouse is very unique. If you haven't climbed it, we recommend that you do. This is the last major brick and mortar lighthouse built in North Carolina in 1875. These pictures are the earliest pictures we have of the site from 1893. This lighthouse lit the remaining section of dark coast from Maine to Florida. This was a really critical moment for the state and nation's transportation that relied really heavily on maritime transport and infrastructure like lighthouses that would help to keep mariners safe. So the Currituck Beach Lighthouse and its keepers performed beautifully and as intended until around the 1930s, when the reliance on lighthouse keepers essentially vanished as the lighthouses themselves became electrified and eventually automated. The tower's first light source was fueled by lard, then kerosene, and was eventually electrified by 1933, which is when things started to change. The light we find is automated in 1937, which essentially eliminated the need for full-time lighthouse keepers. So a person was no longer needed to keep a flame fueled and lit throughout the night, and that need for on-site workers was gone. So lighthouses became much simpler and less complicated to maintain. So with the lighthouse, in the case of Currituck Beach, needing less and less attention, over time, things started to go south as far as the state of the site itself. You can see from this aerial photo of the site in the early 1960s, I'm trying to point out the keeper's house here, which you can see to the west of the lighthouse is starting to show some severe signs of neglect. A more close-up, by the 1970s, you can see the keeper's house. The windows are gone. The house has been vandalized. It was in pretty sad shape. So it's important to note here that architecturally and contextually, this building is very special. It was completed in 1876 and is now the only remaining building of this kind of at least 4 that were built in the country. So this design was specific to a first order lighthouse or light station, which is what the Currituck Beach Lighthouse is. So I'm telling you all of this because this house is really important to OBC's story. It's why we formed. Our founders believed that the house was incredibly important to the history of the Outer Banks and the coming modern space of the Outer Banks, and they asked the State Historic Preservation Office if they could obtain a long-term lease for the purpose of restoring the double keeper's dwelling. And as you can imagine, the reaction was, why would anyone want to do that? I mean, we're all looking at the same picture of this house that is in, looks like it could fall down at any minute. This picture in 1979, this was taken the day that the long-term lease for this house was signed with the state of North Carolina. So OBC quickly formed thereafter, and we got to work. We started restoring the keeper's house over several years. We funded our work with private donations, and we did a lot of the work ourselves. I wasn't born yet, but by ourselves, I mean our founders. So the work took several years, and over time, there were, of course, a few naps in between. This is a good shot showing kind of what we started with this is from the lighthouse looking down at the keeper's house. And then several years later, we're able to kind of start to see some completion taking place. There's paint back on the house. The interior is beginning to be put back together. And today we're able to have this double keeper's dwelling completely restored, and it serves as a centerpiece of the Currituck Beach Lighthouse site. that is a critical part of telling the story of a light station on the North Carolina coast in 1875. So an important footnote here is that while all of this restoration was happening, there were dramatic changes taking place in and around Corolla and along the Outer Banks. So when OBC started restoring this house, there was no paved road to Corolla. And by 1986, that road was built and paved, which really set off growth to this previously essentially isolated place on the northern Outer Banks. And this was happening, of course, all along the North Carolina coast. I mention this here because it's important to understand it in the context of preservation. Preservation is obviously very important, and as an organization, we believe it's important to restore places in a historical context that retains the buffers and the vegetation, as I mentioned briefly earlier. So here, 1976 and 2020, a distinct change. Again, I'll show you 76. This is from the top of the lighthouse, looking obviously towards the ocean, and 2020. So by 1990, the work on the keeper's house was completed and OBC obtained a lease from the Coast Guard for the lighthouse itself. So in the summer of 1990, this lighthouse opened to the public for climbing. It was actually the first in the state to be open for that purpose. The lighthouse needed work as well, so we decided to take that on, starting with, obviously you can see the scaffolding and the repairs that are happening to the gallery. We were removing lead paint, fixing stair railings, and over time, built, as the lighthouse was open to the public, built in interpretive exhibits, safety signs, things like that. And then we just kept going. There were other buildings on the lighthouse compound. This is actually a picture of the Little Keeper's house this is the day that we essentially cleared the vines and found this building in the woods. One by one, the site's contributing structures that kind of comprise this historic light station were restored during this 1990-1993 era. So this includes the Little Keeper's house that you see here, the cisterns to the Keeper's house itself, an outhouse, and a storehouse, which now serves as a staff office. So this is the Little Keeper's house, again, right after discovery. And then this is kind of the finished product, much like the Keeper's house, which it never seems possible to me that something of this state can become functional again. So after a lot of work, the site is a fully complete and intact example of a light station, as I keep mentioning, from the 19th century. All of the buildings are still, they're in their original places. The historic fabric is retained, and the site is complete. The lighthouse itself is still an active aid to navigation, a functioning part of the maritime system. The lighthouse solely was added to the National Register in 1973. We expanded that designation in 2000 to include the entire lighthouse compound, which includes state-owned land that stretches to the east of the site towards the ocean. And by way of the National Lighthouse Historic Preservation Act, OBC is actually now an owner of we own the lighthouse tower itself. That act was a mechanism that allowed lighthouses to be transferred to other agencies, which included nonprofit organizations. So we have a staff that lives on site that actively maintain and manage the site and keep it open to the public. We're open most of the year, reserving some of the winter months to complete restoration work at the site. So the Currituck Beach Lighthouse turned 145 years old last year, and it shows in some areas lighthouses on the ocean need constant repair. So we're in the middle of a pretty complex project at the top of our lighthouse that was delayed last year, of course, due to COVID-19. So the project will restart this summer, where we will install the recast pieces of our roof cornice that were cast last year, and conduct repairs to the lantern wall, which you can see here, which is in front of our original Fresnel lens. We're trying to retain this glass wall so that this beautiful original lens, which has been in place since the lighthouse was built, stays as pristine as it is today. So most of the ironwork on our lighthouse is still original. It's still 145 years old, because we are constantly maintaining this ironwork that's constantly exposed. The key is constant maintenance, which is kind of our philosophy for preservation over time. So that covers our first site, the lighthouse. We'll move a little farther south to Roanoke Island, where Island Farm is today, our second historic site. Island Farm is a living history site that opened in 2010. So in the late 90s, OBC began its next project, which was restoring this antebellum mid-19th century home place on Roanoke Island. So the house is believed to have been built around 1847, one of the 3 remaining pre-Civil War homes essentially on Roanoke Island today. And this is the only one that has been restored, kind of back to its original condition. So we're headed back to 1850. So this map shows Roanoke Island at that time. I'm not sure. I'm hoping that you guys can kind of see Roanoke Island is here, and these are all labels of the families that owned large tracts of land on Roanoke Island. These families were arriving to the island around the 18th century. The farms were large. They stretched sound to sound. The farm that is now modern day Island Farm would have been right about here, near where the historic Freedmen's Colony would have been. The Etheridge farm is what we're focused on, which is the modern day site of Island Farm today. This is from the 50s and gives a pretty good idea of kind of how the island used to be. Now it's mostly houses, and this is the 1950s version of Island Farm, essentially. You'll see lots of farm fields. So a key part of these early days on the Outer Banks is that, like most people that lived there, the diversity was key. You kind of think of, lug nuts on a tire. No one involved themselves in just one occupation. Early Outer Bankers were farmers, they were fishermen, they built boats, they built their houses, they repaired their own equipment. That's what they had to do to survive. And there was a great sense of independence in that. These are some early Outer Banks gardens here. So Adam Doe Etheridge was the one that built the house that's in the center of modern day Island Farm, somewhere between 1847 and 1852. This is an original daguerreotype photograph that we have in our collection of Adam Etheridge himself. Adam and his wife Fanny lived in the house with their 4 children on 420 acres of land. Again, this was stretching sound to sound on Roanoke Island. Adam listed himself as a farmer on the 1850s census, which was significant, that he did a lot of other things, but he believed that his main occupation was farming. We've done a great deal of research on the Etheridge family for this, as we are building this site. And this is the culmination of a lot of that research that is available on our website. I highly recommend you guys check it out. It's a great look at overall Roanoke Island history as well. So back to the beginning of Island Farm, which of course begins with this house that I showed at the beginning of the farm story. So this was officially donated to the organization in 1997. We began our restoration a few years later. The project was led by a professional restoration team. In addition to the restoration, kind of at the same time, we did an archaeological survey of the site, which really helped to kind of inform, the houses here and where were all the contributing structures like the, cookhouse and smokehouse. That helped determine, as where those buildings were and where we would reconstruct them. So another restoration project. The main tasks here were removing kind of the more modern elements of the home, as well as restoring the shed porch on the front and back of the house, which were essentially living spaces, additional living spaces. So that project was completed by about 2001, when, excuse my dog Blue, with our basis of extensive historic research and oral history interviews, we next tackled the reconstruction of the outbuildings on site as they would have been in the mid-1800s. So today, with the home place as the centerpiece, the site tells the story of the life of an average Roanoke Island family before the Civil War. So outbuildings surround the historic homestead. So at this point, there's a cookhouse, a corn crib, a smokehouse, storehouse, slave cabins, and a chicken coop. We have interpreters on site, and every day we are open. We are conducting different programs, hosting school groups. And in addition to the infrastructure itself, the farm is fully functional. So we grow vegetables, we keep livestock, we build our fences, we maintain our buildings, just like the lighthouse. We have a blacksmith shop on site to represent, again, drawing back to that 1850s time period on the island. There was one there at that time. So we use the shop in our normal interpretation of the site. We also have a restored replica windmill built. This was actually built in the late 1970s, and it was at a restaurant in Nag's Head. I don't know if any of you remember that. We, long story short, moved this replica windmill to the farm when the restaurant closed down. These 19th century post mills were all over the coast in the mid 1800s to about 1900. By 1900, they were mostly gone. They were here to grind corn. You can see here this tail structure, hence the name post mill. The mill sits on this post, and this tail rotates the windmill around its base, essentially, so that the blades can meet the wind. So a big part of our work is kind of getting folks to participate along with us. This past week, we've been conducting our annual sweet potato starter kit giveaway. So the Hayman sweet potato is one that we find very interesting to the Outer Banks. So the Hayman is a specialty white flesh sweet potato. You cannot find it in a grocery store. It's grown in a pretty small range of places. The Outer Banks is one of those places. And this potato first showed up in the States on the Outer Banks. So in 1859, Captain Daniel Hayman transported a barrel of these potatoes from Barbados, and they came through Hatteras into Elizabeth City. When the barrel was offloaded, a preacher from the Eastern Shore took some of those potatoes up that way, and they're grown up there. But the rest of the barrel was distributed all around, and we're finding lots of really neat historic records about the records that we set down here in Wanchese and on Roanoke Island, growing this really unique potato. So our whole process here is that the potatoes go in the ground, they grow a slip or a starter plant, and that will be planted in the ground that then you harvest your potatoes from in the fall. So by giving away these kits, our goal is to make this sweet potato as prolific as it once was on the Outer Banks. It's a constant goal of ours to keep the living history farm portion working just as it would have. So we really stick to heirloom historic crops, and we grow just what the Etheridges would have grown. We don't stray far from that in really anything that we do. Here are those Hayman sweet potatoes I was just talking about. We do the same thing with our animals. We are keeping, again, with the 1850 census records of what was happening kind of at this same place. They had chickens, they had what we call banker ponies, otherwise known as the Corolla wild horses. We have 2 of those on site. Our deer cow Roxy, and we have 6 sheep as well. So again, this is the list from the 1860 census of exactly what they had on site. So we're always trying to grow our list of animals for certain. So our programs are different every day at the farm, and we hope that you all will come visit when you come to climb the Currituck Beach Lighthouse. So that covers kind of our main sites. I just wanted to mention a couple of our other ongoing projects that we are working with that Stephanie had mentioned at the beginning. We are working with a folk music collection that was collected by Frank and Ann Warner back in the 40s. They visited the Outer Banks then and recorded songs and sayings from people that lived here. We hosted the premiere of the North Carolina collection of Frank and Ann in 2019 in Wanchese. And this year, after collaborating with the Library of Congress and North Carolina Arts Council, we've obtained the entire collection just recorded on the Outer Banks. So OBC will be distributing the recordings of people that were recorded in the 1940s. OBC will be distributing them to living descendants that live here on the Outer Banks. We're going to have a photographer take portraits of these descendants, and lastly, we'll be conducting oral history interviews with descendants of those that were recorded in 1940. So we're just trying to continue this project that started nearly 80 or over 80 years ago at this point. And we're most excited about a new project we're beginning this year. We are partnering with the Coastal Land Trust to place permanent conservation easements on all of OBC's land around the Currituck Beach Lighthouse and Island Farm. It has long been a goal of our board of directors to really put our preservation in practice and practice what we preach. And we believe, putting these conservation easements on these sites and other land that we own is the only way to reach that goal. So we're very excited about that upcoming project. And with that, I think I will end it. Thank you guys so much for joining. I appreciate it so much.
Well, Ladd, thank you for being here. We really appreciate the opportunity to learn about Outer Banks Conservationists and all your great work. It's beautiful. I would encourage anyone who has questions or comments to unmute and say so. Sometimes it takes a second, so feel free to unmute your microphone and ask.
Great presentation, Ladd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Skip.
We are neighbors. The Manio Rotary Club sponsors the community garden over next to you, and recently a new path has been cut into the woods over there that has revealed the old graveyard of the Etheridges.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, do you have any plans for that site?
Yes, we, as you probably know, the airport authority owns that site, even where the graveyard is. So we're working with the director there that's how we got the graveyard cleared, because it was abandoned and had been vandalized as well. So that area is cleared, and we're going to put just a simple fence around the graves, just so it's more accessible. It's part of the Etheridge family. John B. Etheridge is buried there, who is the brother of Adam Doe Etheridge, who built the Island Farm house. So most everyone from the Etheridge family at the Island Farm site is buried on site in a graveyard there. So this is different that he is not. And there's about 4 or 5 graves there, but we plan to preserve that and kind of secure it so it won't be vandalized anymore.
Thanks. Let us know how we can help.
Great, thank you. The community garden looks great, by the way.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you for your work. We lived in Kill Devil Hills 72 and 73, and it sort of breaks my heart to go back there now and see what was so much open land. And we used to go to a place called the Drafty Tavern as you went over.
Oh, yes. I've heard stories.
You know, now there's nothing but condos everywhere. So thank God you're there trying to save the land and the story and the history. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There's a question, Ladd, about the photo that showed the people in the windows side by side.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the same people, but just later in life, or no?
I don't think it's the same. I think some of them are the same, but not all of them. But obviously it was coordinated perfectly. I mean, they're all wearing the same colored shirts, and I was probably 3 years old when that was taken, but I will find out because now I'm curious.
It is really cool photo.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah. Cool. Does anybody else have questions before we go on to our announcements?
Hey, Ladd, there is a question from Facebook about the sweet potatoes. Can you find them anywhere else? Or how would one go about finding those sweet potatoes?
We will, let's see, best way to find sweet potatoes if you're not here. We are going to be shipping some of the starter plants. So if anyone is interested, you could just email. If you go to our website, you can send an email to our info@obcinc, and we can put you on the list, and the slips won't be ready until probably mid-May. So there's time, and they don't need to be in the ground until the 4th of July. So, but we really want to share them. So thanks.
Very cool. I just put that email in the chat if anybody wants to copy it. And let's get some sweet potatoes going all over the coastal plain. That would be so cool. I love it. Cool. Thanks again, Ladd. Appreciate you being here. I just wanted to give everybody a couple of updates about upcoming Little Lunch lectures and other special events. So it's going to be a little bit longer today, but bear with me. Next week, Cynthia Crane will be with us from the Aurora Fossil Museum in Aurora, North Carolina. The week after, Amy Mead will be with us from the Cooperative Extension to talk about native plants and pollinators. And that's going to be the kickoff to our Pollinator Palooza event. This is a North Carolina Science Festival event, virtual and pandemic proof. And for an entire week, we will be releasing original content videos on our Facebook page, and they'll be posted later on our website, all about pollinators and their importance in our ecosystem. And on the 17th, on Saturday, April 17th, we will have a live stream event to kind of cap off the Pollinator Palooza, and we'll have several educators from all around New Hanover County talking about different pieces of the pollinator story. So that'll be about 1 hour on the 17th of April. Backing up 1 day to April 16th, Jill Pelusius will be with us from Wild Bird and Garden, and she'll be talking about birds, which are also pollinators. So all of that whole week is going to be Pollinator Palooza. So we would like you guys to join us, even if it's just for your regular Little Lunch lecture, but otherwise just feel free to pick up those videos anytime you want and participate that way as well. And then the next thing I want you to kind of put on your radar screen right here on Little Lunch Lectures on May the 14th our new executive director and our founding executive director will be with us to have a conversation about looking back, looking forward, all about the Coastal Land Trust and in our illustrious leadership. So mark your calendar for that. And I'm not going to tell you who it is yet, but you might want to watch your email on Monday for a big announcement. So thanks again for being here. I think that's it for today, and we'll see you again soon. So bye, guys. Thank you.